Blind Nil Audio.
I'm Alex L.
I'm Libby Delana. Welcome
to This Morning Walk podcast.
Welcome, everybody, to This Morning Walk podcast. Today, we have two of my favorite people in the world. We have on the right, Liz Paley. Please raise your hand. Liz Paley is the founder and principal of an incredible company called Framework, a strategic communications company. She is also the companion to one of my favorite furry creatures on the planet named Georgia, the most beautiful dachshund in the world. Just don't let my son hear that, who also has a dachshund. But Georgia is one of my favorite creatures on the planet. Actually,
Amazing.
We have a true love affair, I think it's fair to say.
You do.
And on the left, we have Amanda Hesser. Amanda is an editor. She is a New York Times food writer, food editor of the New York Times, also founder of Food 52. Now, the reason we're all here together is the two of you just completed something called the Great Saunter.
We did.
Which is essentially walking around the entire island of Manhattan.
In one day.
In one day.
It is.
With good snacks.
With excellent snacks.
32
and 32 miles around all the boroughs of Manhattan. Okay, who's going to tell me the history of the Great Saunter? Number one, it's such a beautiful name. What's that?
I said the good student is going to tell
The
you
good
that.
student. Okay, Liz, tell us the history of the Great Saunter.
I'll do my best. I can't give the full history, but I encourage anyone to go to the Shorewalkers organization website to really get the full history. There's also some information on Wikipedia about the Shorewalkers founder. But what I know about Shorewalkers is it's an organization that was founded in 1982. And it is all about preserving, protecting, and building awareness of New York City waterfront. Unlike other cities that are on the waterfront, New York has not made as sort of active, engaged use of its waterfront until more recently. So Shorewalkers was created to bring awareness to that. And the Great Saunter was started in either 1984 or 1985. The internet is dodgy on that. And it is a 32-ish mile walk around the island of Manhattan. You start down in the financial district, you come up the west side, all the way across Inwood Park, and then you come straight back down to the starting point. 12 hours about?
Well, I think we did ours in almost like somewhere between 11 and 12. Yeah.
Powered by snacks.
Yes.
Powered by good snacks. Now, Liz, this is not the first time you've done it, but Amanda, it is the first time that you have this year?
Yes. I saw Liz post about it last year, and I was like, what is this amazing thing that you're doing? Can I join next year? Which I, said in a moment of
high
energy. And then as it approached, I thought, oh my God, am I going to be able to do this? Even though I go to Orange Theory, I work out, but the idea of walking 32 miles suddenly seemed daunting. But I think anyone can do it.
Yes.
It's really, there's something about walking, and also when you're doing it and seeing your city that you live in or a city that you admire in a new way, it just it takes all the blister pain away. It makes it melt away.
Amanda lost 2 toenails, you should know, from the experience.
Oh
it's really compromised my sandal game for the summer.
Oh my gosh. And now think back to when you saw Liz post about it and you sort of learned about it. What do you think it was that was so what was the compelling component of it? Obviously, besides spending all day with Liz walking, which is fabulous.
And we talked for 11 hours straight.
We did.
And did not cover every topic.
Right.
Well, I think I think this experience kind of applies to living maybe almost anywhere, but I think especially in big cities, you sort of end up kind of having you carve out your roots and the places that you go, but you never really fully take it in a city as big as New York. It's very rare that you are like even going to another borough or, like really sort of fully embracing the space that you live in. And I didn't even realize after living here since 1997 that one could walk the entire island, that
Right.
there were actual trails and ways to do it. And I didn't really candidly know exactly where Manhattan ended
Same.
at the
I
top.
don't think I do. I do. I don't. I don't
Yeah.
know where it ends. Yeah.
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 And so I just was intrigued and it seemed, and you know, Liz's enthusiasm is um uh what's the word, contagious. And and so I was like, okay, I want in on that.
Oh, I love that. So where does Manhattan end? I don't
Kind
even
of
know where
in
that
Woody
how do you
Park. Yeah,
Inwood
Inwood
Park.
Park. Yeah.
It
Yeah.
technically ends at the top of Inwood Park and then becomes the Bronx.
Yeah, and there is a waterway. Like you can, so there is an actual like physical
Barrier.
barrier between the two. And the other thing I learned, and I think that the Shorewalkers has been very smart about doing, which is that the west side of Manhattan has been
Mhm,
developed definitely more actively and
mhm.
more beautifully. And so it seems strange at first that you're going to walk up the west side at like the most beautiful part first and not last. But I think they figured out that if they had people walk up the east side, people might bail
Yes,
early on.
because you're walking parallel to the FDR for
FDR,
quite some
right,
time and not feeling the love. But
right.
when you start walking past,
Chelsea
the
Piers.
South Street
Yeah,
ferry terminal, you see the Statue of Liberty, Battery Park City, where there's developed waterfront space, so
Yeah.
park space, urban landscaping, all of that, all the way up to the George Washington Bridge. It's
Yeah.
amazing.
With the little red
Little Red
lighthouse. So
Lighthouse.
cute. Um, but yeah, it gives you a real I feel like also an appreciation of how hard it is to develop these
Yes.
parks and like how much land there is and like how every small or big expanse that opens is a big accomplishment. And I don't know, it gave me like a newfound appreciation for like actually all the space that New York already has and also the opportunity for more to develop.
yeah,
Yeah.
sorry, go ahead, Liz. Yeah.
No, I agree with that, and I think you also really come to see the architectural
Mm,
diversity
Mm,
of this city in a very different way. One of the many things we talked about on our 11-hour walk was that circumnavigating Manhattan, unlike other cities on the water, like maybe Chicago, circumnavigating it isn't the way that you see the most beautiful architectural gems of New York. You're not seeing the museums, you're not seeing, Gilded Age mansions, you're not seeing the most beautiful parts, but you're really appreciating sort of layers of urban development and
mhm.
architectural styles. When you walk right in front of Sutton Place, which is this little charming Georgian brick structure enclave on the east side, you're walking past the United Nations,
yeesh.
and then you're walking past some very modern glass and steel towers as well. So I think you really appreciate that aspect of how New York's been developed.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I mean, I think of the two of you as consummate New Yorkers. I can imagine that you got to know your city in a way that maybe you hadn't before by being on foot and seeing it so sort of intimately and in crevices and places and pathways where you'd never been before. Does that
For
feel right? I
sure.
mean, yeah. I
Well,
and
yeah,
the other
I think that
thing.
also, like, the fact that you're walking, not running, not riding a bike,
Right.
Mhm.
just allows you to take it in just so much more completely because you can take the time to kind of change your like, just look around.
Yeah.
I mean, there were also many moments when we paused to take pictures of, like, interesting flowers,
Yeah.
and you can do that when you're walking. You can't do that if you're on a bike or if you're, sweating and huffing and puffing as you're running, which we do not desire to do.
Right. I
No,
mean,
that's
before you get to Inwood Park, when you're coming up the west side, you enter what is actually a very tiny forest.
Oh, yeah. Uh-huh.
And you're walking on a pathway covered, completely covered under a canopy of trees. you can't see buildings, you can't see the water. You're in a forest and you're still in the middle of Manhattan. Very different than being in Central Park.
Mhm. And so the whole walk, you are next to the water. Obviously, that was the goal of it. But is that true that as you're walking along,
Largely.
basically, I
Yeah,
mean, maybe not,
mostly.
yeah,
Mostly. There are bits where, because there isn't fully developed waterfront pathway the entire way around, there are parts where you're walking, I would say, just a bit inland. Remember, there are 2
sure.
sort of
Yeah,
highway-like structures on either
Mhm.
side of Manhattan, the West Side Highway and the East River or Harlem Drive. So there are times where you, for safety reasons, have to
sure.
be on the non-water side of that. But
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
brief. You are mostly seeing water the whole time.
Which is also an interesting way to understand New York because, yes, it is on the water, but that is not how we hold New York or the
Agree.
vitality of New York is being influenced by the water. It's interesting, something you said, Amanda, about, seeing the city in the pace of walking. Cheryl Strayed talks about walking as the speed of the earth, that as we walk, that is the natural
I love
speed of
that.
Hmm.
things.
Yeah.
And so what happens is we by nature of walking at the speed of the earth, we can take in the information that is aligned with humans, right? Like
Mhm.
we are able to understand what is happening around us more easily when we walk because that is the speed that we were built to be versus on a city bike or in a cab or in a subway. And so the ability to learn about where you are is so much more heightened when we walk. And I feel that to be true. I learn so much about where I am, even in a new place when I go out for a walk.
Yeah, that's true. I will say, not like in non-saunter times when you're walking with Liz Paley, it's a little bit like when you take a podcast and you hit like
I knew
1.5
you were
or
gonna say that.
Correct.
2.5 speed.
Correct.
Then I can't I don't know if I could my brain can't fully take in everything, hers can. But yeah, she is the consummate fast New York walker who's like, "Move over
Right.
Neanderthals."
Yes.
Right.
Um,
Yes.
yes,
Welcome to New York.
out of my
Please
way.
walk faster. Yes.
Did you
Now I
find you
will say
walk?
when we did our first training walk, um, where we walked 10 miles together one Saturday morning in Brooklyn because Amanda was in her head that she didn't think she could walk 32 miles, even though I knew she could walk 32 miles. I was so immediately pleased that we had sort of the same pace, that we were
Right.
really going and moving. But even for me, I felt like as a very fast walker, as someone who, says, okay, if I have 4 minutes, I can get outside, get a coffee, walk the dog, and be back on Zoom. So I do move at a fast pace. It felt, even though it was 11 hours, it felt like such a relaxing day. I think we felt like we knew we were going to complete it. It wasn't going to be 11 o'clock at night and it was dark and we were crying. Um, and it just felt really relaxing to start and know that at the end of the day, still in daylight, we would be back at the starting point, having walked entirely around the island of Manhattan at a lovely pace.
It was incredibly gratifying, and, you know, if anyone who's listening is, like me and is feeling anxious about how much time they're on their phones or consumed by things, like, for 11 hours, full 11 hours,
Yeah.
Beautiful.
you're immersed in something entirely different and wonderful, um, and really kind of fulfilling to one's soul, and I really appreciated that fact. I don't know about you, Liz, but I went home and had some dinner and then conked out for, like, the best sleep.
Yes, completely.
Yeah,
Completely.
yes. It's
Yes.
just like
Well,
you hit
back
a
to the
wall.
yeah. Well, back to the concept of pace. I mean, it is called the saunter after all. I don't know what the actual definition of saunter is, but I don't. I think I I think they probably chose that word very carefully to signal
Mhm,
that this is not a race. You have agency. You can stop whenever you
mhm.
want. If you need to, please do. The idea is to navigate and saunter your way around this incredible city and understand it in a different way. Okay, so you perfectly teed up the concept of training. Okay, so what did training look like for this? Because quite honestly, Amanda, I think anybody who's listening, I mean, I would feel this that, oh my gosh, I've never done it before. So all of a sudden that little voice in your head begins to wonder what does it look like? What does it feel like? How do I take care of myself? Which will lead us to snacks in a minute. But how does one train for something like this? I mean, I think it's probably as much training your thought process as it is your physical body, aside from your toes, which I'm sorry about, your toenails.
Well, I have a feeling that Liz may have done more disciplined and organized training than I did, but I did a couple of long walks at her recommendation, like on the weekend, which, I way back in history, in the 90s, I did run a marathon and I did a very similar thing where you did sort of short runs every other day and then long runs on the weekend that's built up closer to, I think you max out at 18 miles because at that point it's like the rest is just grit and determination. That's all you've got left after 18 miles. So I kind of having that in mind, I think that was helpful. And so what I did in between was my regular like Orange Theory, which is a sort of cardio, cross training.
Mm.
But that's and stretching. But I didn't really do much more than that. How about you?
So this was the second time I did the Saunter start to finish. The first time I did it was 3 years ago with a friend who lives in Hingham, Massachusetts, who introduced me to it. It was pouring rain the entire time. I did 13 miles and decided I'm out.
Smart, smart.
I was in a very busy work phase, didn't wanna get sick, had important business travel that I was worried I wouldn't be able to do. She completed it, but before that one, I honestly didn't do any training because I just didn't have time, or I didn't make the time. I was in a really busy work mode, but very inspired by her training regimen, which was, all these detailed X mile walks, all that. The 2 years ago, when I did it the whole time, again, I didn't do a lot of training. I walk a lot, as many New Yorkers do, um, you know, and I didn't have a Fitbit or an Apple Watch or an Aura Ring at the time, so I didn't really have a way of tracking how far I was walking, but I would just sort of think about, on the weekends, "Oh, if instead of walking 40 blocks, I could walk 70 blocks, I'll do it," but it wasn't very disciplined. This year, um, I actually just did a bunch of long walks, not because I thought I needed to, but more it was a great activity, and for all the reasons that you talk about walking and all the benefits of it, all of that was in force.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I can also imagine, I think there's something really powerful about doing it together, right? I think there's a component of deciding that you're going to do this for all the reasons. It's probably
Mhm.
not even the mileage reasons. It's not the, number of calories reasons. It's not the number of steps. It's that doing something together in a city you love on a day that is undoubtedly, I think, was beautiful,
Mhm.
learning more about each other and the city and this place where you are is really powerful and can honestly, really be this one of the supportive tools of being able to do something like this. Some friends and I did a 12-hour walk
Wow.
a year ago for a birthday, and it was not really that it was a 12-hour walk or however many miles. It was that, actually, to your point, Amanda, when you said to put away your phone and to be together doing something that you at the end of the day are very proud of. You've learned a lot. It's such I don't know, there's something about doing these kinds of things with someone you really care about that can be honestly the momentum and the sort of energy that enables you, even as your toenails were hurting, to get you through. And that's not to say that we should all walk through all that pain, but I do think there is something about companionship and dear friendship that makes these kinds of events really, really meaningful and powerful.
Well, walking is such an interesting communal activity because
Right.
certainly in a place like New York, typically when you get together with people, because we're in the epicenter of culture and
Yes.
dining and retail and so much stimulation, we commune as New Yorkers around something else.
Mhm.
We go see a play and then we talk about the play. We're having a meal and we're talking about the meal. We attend an author reading and we're talking about it. And the idea of your only activity is something that you're not talking about. So you're talking about everything
Oh,
else
beautiful. Yeah.
while doing that
Mhm.
activity, and Amanda's right. We talked, and I'll talk about the 3rd leg of our walking stool, my friend Barbara, in a minute, but we talked for 11 hours and still felt like, "Oh, we need to get together soon," because we
Yeah.
didn't cover all the subjects, and
Yeah.
that's an amazing feeling. But the 3rd leg of our walking stool was a good friend of mine, Barbara, who lives in San Francisco, flew 3,000 miles, having never done the Saunter, to do that with us, and she had recently completed, walking the Camino with
Mm.
her adult son, which is something they had
Hmm.
always wanted to do together. And to your point about it being daunting, she was daunted by the idea of walking 32
Sure.
miles, which to me seemed crazy because for days on end, she and
Right.
her son walked 12, 15, 20 miles, but, you get into your head about it.
No, of course. Here's a question. Do you now view distance within on that beautiful island on Manhattan differently? I always felt like, gosh, when I was in New York, I was on the west side, I had to get over the east side. I'm like, oh my God, it's so far. It's everything is forever in New York. Getting to Brooklyn takes forever. It's impossible to get there. But once you do a walk like this, that's not to say that I would advocate for somebody walking from Chelsea over to Brooklyn very often, but it does do something to recalibrate that sort of notion of distance because and maybe this is just me, but I feel like everything in New York is forever away. It's really hard to get to. But
Mhm.
once you start walking the 20, 30, 40, 50 blocks, it's like, oh, it's not that bad. It's not that far.
It certainly has, I feel like, altered mine. I mean, I always loved walking in New York, but now everything sort of just seems like so much like just, mini walks compared to that.
Yes.
Yeah. But I
Right.
Yeah.
know I feel like Liz is the biggest walker I know in New York, though. I feel like you really actively walk probably more than anyone. And it seems like you sort of see that as your primary like way of getting to places
I
with others
do.
as secondary. Whereas I think
Yeah.
most New Yorkers think subway first or,
Mm.
or Uber first.
Yeah, I do. I mean, walking in New York is always my first choice, and I would say Subway is my second choice, and I'll choose the Subway if it's just really too far to walk in the time that I
Sure.
have, or, um, if it's just complicated for some reason, if it'll be just a particularly tricky walk, but I'll also sometimes walk half the way and then
Yeah.
hop on a subway for the last part
Great.
of it. So if I'm going out to Brooklyn, sometimes I'll walk from where I live in Chelsea down to City Hall, and then I'll hop on the subway.
That's funny.
Right.
Sometimes I'll do that. Well, back when now I'm working in Brooklyn, but I live in Brooklyn. And when I was working in Manhattan, I would sometimes, especially in the summer months, take a train down to City Hall that I could walk over the Brooklyn Bridge
Oh,
and home
I love
because it was
Oh,
just a
beautiful.
nice, uh, kind of
Yeah.
punctuation to the day. And it's such a special view and experience.
Yeah.
Just like taking in the harbor, looking up, sort of up the East River and yeah, and just also, that's both of the waterfronts on both sides of the river there have gone through such a
mm,
dramatic
Right.
shift, and
Transformation. Yeah.
it's nice when you're walking to sort of take in and appreciate, like, how like, the changes that are happening.
yeah. And
Uh,
walking is such a great discovery medium, for lack of a better
Mhm.
word. If you get on the subway at 72nd Street and get off at 14th Street, there's a whole lot in between that you haven't seen. And when you walk, you're so subject to, I know where I started, I know where I'm ending up. I can choose the path to get there, which isn't a choice you have in a taxi or on a subway. And you can get distracted by, "Oh, what's that awning down that street?" This just happened to me the other day. I was walking back to my apartment after going to the most amazing ribbons store in Manhattan, and I looked down a street and saw this little awning, and it looked like a French flag. I walked down. It's a brand new shop that I'd never
Mm.
seen before that sells all French food and cute tea towels, and I will tell you about it. Um, and I would never have discovered that
right, right.
other than being on foot. If I'd been on a city bike, I'd have been looking straight ahead of me,
Mhm.
and I wouldn't have seen it. So walking it's the best discovery medium.
Yeah, I love that. It sort of enables you to treasure hunt. I also really love, Liz, and you and I have done this, but I love when you said, Amanda, that you would take the subway to a certain point and then walk yourself across the Brooklyn Bridge, and you would look up the river and see the sun go down. I've often had a lot of people say, "Well, Lib, where you walk is so physically beautiful," and there's no doubt it is. How do you walk in a city and
Mm.
still sort of hold and host, the beauty of the natural world? And I think you just articulated that. Liz, you and I have walked past this one pine tree, which I have fallen in love with, which
Yes,
every time we go for a walk, I'm like, we have to go by that. We have to go by that tree. We have to see what phase it's in. Is
yes,
it blooming? Are the pine cones coming out?
yes.
So I think that the reality is there is those kind of natural beauty moments in addition to this discovery opportunity as you walk along. But yeah, to walk down the street as the sun's going down, you still are able to tap into some of those natural, beautiful, beautiful moments, which we just all have to be attentive to. Okay, so let's fast forward. Let's get to the snacks. I mean, let's be
Well, it's so
honest.
funny 'cause,
I,
both of our stomachs are
Or
growing. It's like they're like
grumbling.
they're like talking to each other. They're having their own conversation. It was definitely time for snacks. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay,
Uh,
so I'd like to hear the snack strategy, please. I mean, I know what you were making, Liz, but I'd like you to tell everybody. I mean, we do have here, someone who is fairly accomplished in the food world. I would love to hear what your
Well, I
what was
totally
the
fell down.
strategy?
I fell down on the snack front, but
Oh,
but anyway, we're gonna talk about Liz's delicious, or
what did we end up calling them?
energy balls,
Saunter spheres?
Saunter spheres.
Saunter
Yes, that's right,
spheres. We
Saunter
called them
spheres.
Saunter spheres.
The recipe can be found on Food 52.
Yes.
Um,
the-
so
there you
I
go.
found one in the freezer. Or I just literally had one over the weekend because I
Oh,
was
you
like,
did?
yes, yes,
I
they're
should have
so
brought
good.
you
They are
more.
so good.
Yeah.
I mean, it's basically peanut butter, chia seeds.
So when years ago when I worked at a company, the most incredible assistant used to make these for me before very stressful work moments, and she called them energy bites. So they're almond butter or peanut butter, mashed banana, hemp hearts, chia seeds, flaxseed, coconut. You can put
Oats.
oats, you can put dark chocolate chips in them. And you just sort of mash them together into these little balls, which we then froze, and then we had them in our little Fjallraven, hip packs, um,
Sure.
and just could eat them along the way. So it's a little burst of
Mhm.
protein. It doesn't make you thirsty because it's not
Oh
salty,
yeah.
but we also had dried fruit.
Yeah, like, dried
You had dried
mango.
mango,
Mm.
We
unsalted
had
nuts.
yes, and then those, little packs of peanut butter
Oh,
and
right.
almond butter.
Yes, the little Justin's squeezed
Those were
peanut
good.
butter
Yeah, those are
almond
great.
butter, which is great.
Those were critical. And I think you also brought these little, like, packs of dry like, powdered like, you could add to water for, like,
Oh, right, what you
electrolytes.
turned me on to, Libby, the
Oh, the
drip drop.
electrolyte. Oh, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. Yeah,
so we
that's
just put
amazing.
those in our water, but, I mean, I think the amazing thing too is I've never run a marathon, I would imagine so hard and that I'd be hungry all the time. Um, but, walking it doesn't feel it feels, at least to me, like you're nourishing your body, not depleting it. So,
Well said.
we had
Yeah.
snacks
Mhm,
because we like snacks,
mhm.
and we're gonna be doing something for 11 hours that is not about food. That's a long time for the 2 of us to not have food. So, that
Yeah,
was the reason to have snacks, but there was no point where I think
yeah,
either of us felt like if we don't eat something, we're
right.
gonna pass out.
Mm. Yeah, I think the point being that it is well, the way you approached it wasn't necessarily exercise or working out. You were going for a walk,
Right.
and honestly, you could stop and have lunch anytime, I suppose, and then carry
Mhm.
on.
We
Um,
could.
Mhm. Yes,
yeah.
you wanna tell what our stopping point?
What was our stopping point?
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
Oh, yes,
right.
yes.
So my trainer happens to live at the top of Inwood Park. So she and her boyfriend agreed to be, for the 2nd year in a row for me, the midpoint stopping
Oh,
point.
great. Right.
So we popped off the route just a little bit, maybe a
Mhm.
half-mile detour, if that, and, you're in someone's apartment that you know. We got to have our feet checked in case there were blisters, they had Band-Aids, and she, as a personal trainer, had laid out this beautiful presentation of really healthy food. So, whole grain bread,
Mhm.
turkey, cheese, there was some peanut butter, there were carrots, there was hummus, more water, more electrolytes, raisins, you know, and I mean, we were probably there for 8
Uh-huh.
minutes, but,
Right.
we
Yeah.
attacked her beautiful buffet like wolves.
Yeah.
Sandwiches, water, bathroom stop,
Yeah,
blister check, and go, and that was amazing, A, to not have to carry food with us,
Right. Right.
but I also don't know how we would have felt sitting down, like, somewhere to
yeah.
eat.
I think you might, yeah, then you sort of
Yeah,
lose your
your
yeah, your
momentum.
momentum.
You're
Yeah, but
yeah,
that was
yeah.
amazing.
I mean, that was like a bonus. I feel like if you had to do the saunter without that, which
Yeah,
obviously most people do, it's still like you don't have to like pack a ton because I think to Liz's point, it's not
right,
like you are getting like super hungry, but you just need little kind of bursts of food along the way, and
right.
definitely saunter spheres
Yes.
um, is
Yeah,
the
a
way to
lot of
go.
people pack a peanut butter and jelly
Yeah,
sandwich
yeah,
Right.
because
Yeah,
a
yeah.
little
Yeah.
sugar, a little protein, some carbs, lightweight, so a lot
And
of
off you
people
go.
do that.
the biggest
Well,
surprise for me along the way, actually, and it's the thing I probably worried about most was like, where are we going to go to the bathroom?
Bathroom.
And I knew that there was a bathroom break
mm,
at your trainers,
Yeah,
and
which
that
you're
and that
13 or so miles
yeah.
in.
So that I mean, and that was delightful. But
Yeah,
you would be surprised at how many very decent, often clean
yeah.
public bathrooms there are along the route in New
mm,
York City. I
mm.
just have always thought of like a New York public bathroom as kind of like just your last
Yes,
your
your
last
last hope.
option, your last
Yes,
hope. But actually, there were many, and they were
true.
pretty. There was one or two where I was like, I don't really want to visit that one again. But but that was another sort of like like this kind of urban planning is
Yeah,
so important, and not just for a saunter, but for the everyday.
yeah,
And that it's nice to
Mhm.
know that New York has really kind of like worked on that and improved that. I feel like a lot of cities are paying attention to that kind of
yeah,
thing.
I do too.
Yeah.
Which
I
makes
love
things like
that.
walking, more
Yeah.
pleasurable.
Yeah. So, Alex and I often say that this morning walk is not about miles. It's not about steps. It's not about how many days in a row you do it. It's about the fact that we do it and we understand and feel the impact that going for a walk has on our well being. If you were to if you were to share to somebody what was the most meaningful part of the saunter or why they might consider doing their own version of a saunter, it might be 5 miles, it doesn't really matter, but doing something that feels sort of outside the realm of what you think you can do. What did you, A, what did you learn? B, why is it a good idea to potentially you know, take on something, consider going for a walk that's going to take you 11 hours, 12 hours, 30 plus miles. I mean, what is it that you learned by going for a walk that was longer than you had ever done before? And, why would you do it again, and what did you learn?
I have sort of a two-part answer to that. One is that I think for the longest time, I and sort of many others I know feel like in the city there's often a sense of like, I want to reconnect with nature. I'm going
Mm.
to go on this
Mm,
trip to reconnect with nature. I'm going to like go to the mountains, or I'm going to go on a hike, or I'm going to go, and that actually you can reconnect with nature here in New York City. And
Yeah.
it reminded me of that in this very powerful way. And then the second part, which we've already discussed, but I do feel like is so important, is just that the chance to connect with a friend,
Mhm.
and in this case a new friend, Barbara, over this long period of time. It's so rare to have
Mhm.
this much time to just have a conversation evolve, or like have topics bubble up.
Mhm.
We're often just, the time that we spend with friends is very sort of limited and specific, and this just felt so much more organic, and it was
Mm.
so nice to be able to like connect and deepen a friendship through a walk like this.
I love that. I would also say it doesn't have to be 11 hours, right? To say to somebody, let's go
Mhm.
for a walk for an hour,
Yes,
and to
even
put
an
away
hour.
our phones. Yeah,
Yep.
to put away our phones and hold that space for the conversation as it bubbles up is also equally is really powerful.
Yeah. I so I agree completely with what Amanda said. I think also for me, it reminds me that if I'm in a foreign city, I will stop and look at
Mm,
architecture. I will read a plaque on a building. And it was a good reminder to do that in my own city.
Mhm.
I mean, I passed St. Patrick's Cathedral, one of the most beautiful structures in the world that millions of people come just to see every year. I walk by it, and at a certain point, I'm embarrassed to say I don't even notice it anymore. Um, and, each year after the Saunter, I would find that if I passed something like that, I would sort of say, "You know what? I'm just gonna pop in for 2 minutes and just be in that structure or get closer to it or read the plaque." Um, I also think even though this is a cliched thing to say, I think proving to ourselves that we can do hard things is always good. So, is the thought of walking 32 miles daunting? Sure. There was lots of talk about what sneakers, what socks. Do you change socks? Do you not change socks? Do you get walking shoes, cross training shoes, all of that? And those things can be important because if your shoes don't fit, if your socks aren't right, you can, terrible. But, um, but just even if you go for a 2-hour walk and you've never done that before, just pushing beyond what you think your limits are in a safe way is a great thing to do.
Mhm.
It is a great thing to do. I've certainly said this to you, Liz, which is there. Dean Karnassus, who's an ultra marathon runner, has this wonderful quote, which I never get exactly right, but it's something along the lines of, "We need to make sure that we don't confuse comfort with happiness."
Mm,
And
Mm.
so one could say that going for a walk for that amount of time was, to a certain degree, uncomfortable. But I can imagine it may have been a little uncomfortable, and, you may have been a little sore after, but I also imagine the next day you felt pretty happy. I mean, there
Oh,
was an
yeah.
oh, yeah.
incredible
Yeah.
sense of accomplishment. Okay, so I would just say, and then I'll let you all go, but I think, for me, one of the overarching, glorious things about going for a walk, and this may sound terribly woo woo, but it's really an invitation to be present. I mean, that's what you just said, Liz, about walking past the cathedral.
Mhm.
Like, oh, I'm here right now. This is an incredible place. Or walking past, our favorite pine tree, or across the Brooklyn Bridge, or to be with each other. That present moment, there's something about going for a walk together side by side that really is, to me, an invitation to remember that. And
Mhm.
our world goes so fast. Subways, life, phone calls, and to put it all away and go for a walk together is certainly one of the most beautiful things we all do together. So, thank you both. I adore you. And we can find the Saunter spheres somewhere on Food 52.
Yes, uh-huh.
Yes.
Okay, so everybody can find that. I thank you both. I adore you. I hope you have a great walk today, and thank you for joining me.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you for inviting us.
Of course. Bye.
Bye.
This Morning Walk is a production of Blind Nil Audio, hosted by me, Alex L.
And me, Libby Delana. Produced and edited by Chris Jacobs.
If you find value and meaning in the conversations that Libby and I have, please share the show with a friend and consider leaving a 5-star review. Comments on Apple Podcasts really help us out. When you do that, it introduces this show to a bigger audience. Thank you so much for listening.
You are wonderful. Have a great walk.
The views, information, or opinions expressed in this series are solely those of the individuals involved and do not necessarily represent those of Chip and Joanna Gaines, Blind Nil Audio, nor Magnolia.